Hello everyone, how are you? I hope like me you had a totally fantastic weekend. Hang on, I just forgot to turn my email off. Let me turn it off because otherwise it'll keep pinging. I hope you're really good. I spent ages in the garden on the weekend, so that was fantastic. Okay, so we're up to week 4 and I guess I'm really optimistic that you're all okay. If I haven't heard from you, I assume that everything's going well, but if I'm wrong, can you please email me? As I said to you when I spoke to you earlier, teaching online can be really lonely for us too if we're not getting lots of interaction from students, so I would love to hear about it. I think it is really easy in a fully online subject to be quite invisible, but I know from a number of years that it's also really easy to get behind, and when you do get behind, it's quite hard, isn't it, to call out and just say, sorry, I've been really struggling, I feel really overwhelmed now, I need some help, but please do that. I'm hoping you're getting the impression that I'm totally approachable and I'm really happy to help. I'm keen to talk about week 3 and 4 and assessment 1.3 and 1.4. So over the last week or so, you're now into week 4, you've met Dylan with asthma. My colleague Dr. Carol McKinstry, an OT, wrote that scenario. I know nothing about football. In fact, I went to my first game at the MCG a few weeks ago and I thought it was totally fantastic, but I was much more interested in watching the crowd than the football. So I know nothing about what a beep test is, let alone whether 13 is very good. So I thought I'd better have a look on Google, and Google tells me that it's excellent. I'm sure that one of you out there who knows all about football and beep tests will tell me if Google's wrong. So I think what I want to do is get you to really think about the scenario and think about what's said and what's not said in that scenario, or what may not be terribly explicit. So I've made a bit of a list and I've got those in the notes for you. So I'm just going to have a look at my list and whiz through them for you and tell you what I was thinking about when I read it. So the things that I thought straight away about were, okay, this kid is serious about his sport if he's got a beep test of 13, assuming that's true. So I wonder whether he's panicking if there's something wrong with him. Is he worried that he might have asthma? Is he really worried that asthma might stop him being able to play footy? He's a first year uni student. I wonder how he's managing with his studies. Has he got friends? It says that he didn't know anyone. I wonder about that, how he's balancing his footy and all of his other commitments. Is he living away from the university? Because it says that he was hanging around with other kids on campus. Is this his first time living away from home? I wonder how he's managing with that. I wonder whether he's eating okay. It says he's skinny, which he might just be skinny, but I was really thinking about, wonder what his nutrition's like, wonder if he's drinking too much, etc. I also, this is slightly tangential, but I also wondered in the scenario about whether the trainer needed to do more. How detailed was his questioning? Did he really push Dylan and say, we need to get some medical support for you? I did wonder then whether there might be a lack of knowledge in the footy club as well. It says in the scenario that his mother didn't think it was asthma, so I wondered what Dylan and his mum know about asthma and the risk factors. Just because there's not a family history, would that rule out asthma necessarily? Dylan frustratingly didn't go to the doctor. Is he okay with money? Why didn't he go? Does he know where to get bulk billed medical care? Was he hesitant about going to the doctor for another reason? It says he bought a puffer, and I wondered, what did he tell a pharmacist about what had been going on with him? Did the pharmacist give him some education about using his asthma medication? Interestingly enough, I've been a pretty bad asthmatic now most of my life, and nobody has ever showed me how to use my asthma puffer, and nobody has ever asked me how I use it. I probably resisted using a spacer with it for a number of years, but then finally decided I probably should, because I knew that was the best way of getting Ventolin effectively into my lungs. And I must admit, it's improved dramatically since I did that. So I wonder, has anyone shown Dylan how to use his puffer? Has anyone asked him to show them how he uses it? And importantly, I wondered what his health literacy was like. Okay, so that's a quick list. I've just made that list in a few minutes. And if you think about that list, all of them could be expressed as risk factors. Remember, issues can be tentative. So you might say to me that, okay, but I don't know anything from that scenario about whether his nutrition is poor. But the purpose of developing issue statements is so they can be tested in partnership with the person you are seeing. So you might potentially write something like, Dylan is potentially at risk of loneliness. And it's up to you when you talk to him and you work through a cue and response interview to actually identify whether that really is a problem. So for my example, I might write that Dylan is at risk of increased stress levels. The strategies I might use might be talk to him. I might do a cue and response interview with him. I might complete a stress tour with him. I might ask him about his sleep, his eating, see how his studies are going. Is he going to class? Has he made any new friends? I might ask him to keep a diary for me that outlines a typical 24-hour day. So make sure that you watch the Week 3 TED Talk and think about behaviour change, specifically around education. So the purpose of assessment 1.3 is to get you started with potential risk factors and strategies to address them. So you need to post on the discussion board. It's a really quick activity for you to do, and I notice that many of you have done this. Disappointingly though, there's quite a few stragglers. So I'm wondering whether you could please jump on and do that, because as you know, you need to post up a couple of things and you need to respond to another student. And I know that there are students sitting there waiting, panicking that the rest of their group aren't engaging. So assessment 1.3 feeds directly into assessment 1.4. And if you do the discussion board posting and get feedback, assessment 1.4 will be super quick. You have a pretty simple template to complete for assessment 1.4, and that won't take long. As per the directions, you need to provide references at the bottom that you have looked at. For my stress example, I might look at guidelines re stress reduction. I might Google tools to assess risk of stress. And so I would provide a list of all of the sources I consulted, including online web pages, as my reference list. So in week 4, your content has a strong focus on behaviour change. The important bit here is that just writing Dylan needs education is not enough. What strategies would you put in place to ensure that the education is effective? As outlined in the content of week 4, the Partners in Health Scale and Cue and Response interview are important tools. So if I think about some of the examples that I might, some of the discussion I might have with Dylan, if I go back to my list of some of the tentative issues that I put through, I might say to him questions like, okay, Dylan, so it's your first year of uni. Tell me how you're going with your studies. Now, typically, Dylan would say, oh, it's okay. So I might say, okay, I'd really like to unpick that a little bit more. So have you been attending classes regularly? What have you learnt so far? Tell me about the different subjects that you're doing and the amount of time that you're putting into each subject. So I don't want this video to be too long, but hopefully this gives you an idea that you've got to sort of really engage with people to unpick what they say. So I might say to him, have you made any new friends? Tell me how that's going. What do you do socially? How often would you catch up with people? How are you balancing your footy and your other commitments? How much time do you need to spend training? And how's that training going with the other things that you have to do? Does your footy ever get in the way of study, or is your study getting in the way of your footy? So I think the message I'm trying to give you is that until you get really experienced with this, you tend to look for yes/no answers rather than tell me more, explain that, tell me a bit more about what might be happening. So getting really good at that interviewing. And if you can get somebody to practice with, I think that's a fantastic strategy to use. Now, what else have I got written here that I think is really important? Oh yeah, it's really important to think about motivational interviewing and SMART goals. I think most people do SMART goals really badly. So even here in my role, I supervise staff, and these are really experienced staff, and you ask them to put together a SMART goal, and very few of them think about each component of a SMART goal. So if I set a goal for Dylan, I would need to think about, so a really simple one might be, by the end of this session, Dylan understands the key concepts of chronic condition self-management and can provide me with a summary of what we have discussed in the session. So it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's realistic, and it's got a time frame. So spend a fair bit of time having a look at that, because I know from first semester that many students got feedback that their SMART goals weren't great. Now, what else do I want to tell you? Oh yes, at the bottom of week 4, you will see a care plan that I've completed for a different client. Make sure you have a really good look at this, because this should help heaps with completing assessment 1.3 and 1.4. Anyway, please do let me know how you're going. I'm really happy to talk to you at any time. I'm going to make another short message soon about more formal feedback, which is due this week. So I'll do that as a really quick one. I'm looking at the time, and I'm hoping this hasn't gone too long for you. But again, hope it's really helpful. Please do let me know. And the other thing is, please give me some feedback about whether it's helpful as well. I don't just want to hear, I want to hear about really negative stuff, but I also want to hear about things that are going really well, because that will help me develop this subject much better for you, but also for students doing this subject in the future. So have a great day. The sun's shining here, which is fantastic. And I'm going to get in and do a whole lot of chatting to you in your groups. So please do post for the activity. Okay, thanks heaps. See ya.